normal.
RCP chamber pressure looks good.
Doubling up. Roger roll, Atlantic.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight outside SCE off. Bring in SCE off.
Yikes. You bet. Okay. We don't need any more of these.
Well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to Launch Complex 39A at the Kennedy Space Center, where we're bringing you live coverage of yet another Falcon 9 launch with several Starlink satellites and a special guest on board. Now, as you can tell from what I just said, this isn't an ordinary Starlink launch for several reasons, and we're actually going to dive into that in just a few moments. But first, I would like to introduce all the co-hosts who I have tonight. So, first off, out in the field, we have Julia Bergeron. How are we doing out there, Julia? How's it looking?
Well, thank you for having me. It is a beautiful night here out at the 39 press site at Kennedy Space Center, and the moon is rising. The rocket is bright on the pad, and we're so happy to be here with all of you.
Love to hear it. And also out there with Julia, we have Thomas Berghart. Thomas, how are we doing out there for you?
Doing well. Like Julie said, it's a beautiful night, and we're going to be focusing on one rocket tonight, although there's actually three out here today. We can talk more about that later, but it's a beautiful night to go to space.
Absolutely, and we got a gorgeous shot right here. I'm really excited for another night launch of Falcon 9. And also in the studio with me, we have Nick and Sweeney. How are we doing, Nick?
You know what? I'm doing fairly well. Not as well as Julia and Thomas, who are looking at the rockets. So well, slightly jealous, but I guess I'll have to make do with this.
Awesome. And of course, we have Das and Patrick operating, and I'll be your host for tonight, Ian Atkinson, with NASASpaceflight. Now, what we're looking here at the pad is Falcon 9 with 34 Starlink satellites on board. And if any of you are familiar with Starlink launches, that's not a lot. And that's because there's not just Starlink satellites on board. There's also the BlueWalker 3 spacecraft. Now, that is coming up for AST SpaceMobile cellular broadband constellation. And we're going to discuss that a little bit more later. But first off, I'd like to say, as with every stream, this is a very conversational stream. You love hearing your questions, comments, things like that. So if anyone in here has any questions regarding Falcon 9, Starlink, the booster flying here, which I'm going to discuss in just a second, be sure to hit us up in chat at NASASpaceflight with your questions. That'll make it pop up in some fancy software we have here in the background and make it much, much simpler for us to see your questions. But also, yeah, we have an interesting booster here. Thomas, do you want to kind of give us an overview of what this booster is and why we're discussing this booster? Why is this even important here?
Yeah, sometimes we just throw out a serial number and say, all right, this is the booster that's flying today. It's flying X many times, and there you go. But today is the first time in a little bit that we have a new record-breaking booster. This is booster 1058, which made its debut on the Crew Demo 2 mission. So the first Falcon 9 first stage to launch humans to space. It has flown 13 total missions prior to tonight. And for those who have been keeping track, that might give you a hint, because tonight will be the 14th flight of that booster, which is a new record for Falcon 9 first stages. So it'll become the new fleet leader after it lifts off tonight. Hopefully it'll have a successful landing downrange on a shortfall of Gravitas, which is stationed downrange, and that would complete 14 trips to space and back, and again, make it the new fleet leader. So a new record being broken there. There's also a second record being broken on tonight's mission that Ian started to allude to earlier regarding the rideshare payload. So like he mentioned, 34 Starlink satellites on board, which is a pretty low number. The rest of the payload mass capability is being taken up by a rideshare payload, and that payload is going to be deployed first. So today's flight, the upper stage will have its first burn to get into a orbit, a low orbit. It'll have a coast phase. There will be a very brief 2-second burn to circularize that orbit, and that'll be the orbit that the rideshare payload, BlueWalker 3, gets deployed into. Now, once that is done, the upper stage is going to actually perform 2 more burns to change its orbit to the Starlink deployment orbit. So it'll do 1 burn to change the perigee, change the perigee to a slightly lower orbit, and then another burn to adjust the apogee accordingly. The rideshare payload is being deployed higher than the Starlink payload. It's a little bit over 400 kilometers altitude. The Starlink payloads will still be deployed in their normal lower orbit, and of course that is to make sure that any satellites that are dead upon arrival in orbit will safely re-enter relatively quickly. But because of that, you're keeping track, that's already 4 burns of the upper stage. And then just like most low Earth orbit missions, the upper stage will do a deorbit burn, which means that the MVAC engine on tonight's upper stage will burn a total of 5 times. And that will also be a new record across SpaceX missions. They have never ignited the upper stage more than 4 times. Tonight's mission will require 5 for a complete successful mission. So 2 records being broken on today's flight, which is the Starlink Group 4-2 mission. You'll notice that that second number is pretty low, and that's likely because of waiting for the rideshare payload to be ready. So a Shell 4 mission that is well overdue, but is finally going to get off the ground tonight, hopefully.
Awesome. And yeah, like you said, this seems like a kind of mundane mission on the surface because you have 34 Starlink satellites plus a rideshare. But there's a lot going on in the background. And while we're speaking about that rideshare, I actually like to discuss a little bit about what BlueWalker 3 is. So BlueWalker 3, which is the secondary, or I don't think secondary, the rideshare payload on board, that is coming from AST SpaceMobile. Now that company is working to have kind of similar to Starlink, except for cellular connectivity. So they want to have an orbital constellation of cellular connectivity satellites, and BlueWalker 3 is one of the prototypes. Now, BlueWalker 3, the actual bus of it is not that large for a satellite, but once it gets into space, it's going to deploy a very large, approximately square-shaped antenna, and that's going to be used to broadcast cellular signals down to Earth. And eventually, they hope to have about 243 satellites in their constellation someday. Now, again, this is just a prototype satellite, so they're far from having a constellation ready, but it's very cool to see. Honestly, to kind of see 2 constellations launching in one mission, if you think about it. But yeah, very cool things happening there. Now we'll hop into some questions here. I have a few in the queue from Amiga Clone. This is actually a question that I thought about, and I'm not too sure on the answer. I would assume yes, but is the special guest on board, so BlueWalker 3, is that the reason why Starlink 4-2 has been delayed 10 months? Do any of you have like a solid answer on that, a yes or no?
While I don't think we have an official answer, I do believe that is probably the most plausible explanation. This was similar to the other rideshare mission 4-20 that launched just a little bit ago, which was also like out of order and later than, if you were just launching in numerical order, would have launched earlier. I think the most plausible explanation is that they assigned the rideshare payload to that mission, and then, of course, SpaceX will happily wait around for the rideshare payload to be ready because they can simply launch other Starlink missions that only have Starlink payloads on board as they are ready. So waiting around for the rideshare payload, and once that payload is ready to go, then they launch that mission designation. The numbers of the mission designation, this came up during the Shell 1 launches as well. They don't coincide to the order of launches. They are assigned ahead of time, and they do coincide with certain rideshare payloads if they get assigned to a flight. So it's not the first time this has happened, but that's most likely the reason. It's just waiting for the rideshare payload to be ready to go.
Gotcha. Sounds good. And a question here, a bit of an interesting kind of open-ended question here, but from Zolwick asking, how many times do we think SpaceX can reuse a single booster? So I think this is more of a speculating, but I'll toss this to Nick first. Nick, do you have any estimates on, how many flights do you think SpaceX might get out of a booster before Falcon's retired eventually?
Oof, well, hopefully a lot. I mean, this is the this booster's flown 13 times, and this is going to be his 14th flight, assuming it lands correctly and does everything it's supposed to be. Hopefully we'll fly some more. But yeah, honestly, I could see them going to 20 or 30 flights fairly easily. I know they've talked about going up to 100 in the future. But yeah, we'll see how they do. They have an awesome track record thus far, and it seems like they're really getting their process in place. So hopefully a lot.
Awesome. Yeah. And I agree. I hope they do get a lot out there because, again, obviously it's going to help them get a return on their investment for Falcon 9, but also it'll give them some great data on reuse in general for when it comes to, well, Starship, obviously. So either way, getting a high flight rate is going to be a major, major win for SpaceX. But interesting question there, Zolwick. And from Evan here, a question I actually love to answer because I know the answer, saying, what is the flight path trajectory tonight? They're on the North Carolina coast, so could they see the landing burn from the beach possibly? Well, lucky for you, Evan, the flight trajectory is going northeast out of Florida, so about 52 degrees inclined from the equator. And what that means essentially is this rocket is going to be hugging the East Coast as it flies. So if anyone here lives from Florida all the way up to Maine, maybe even Newfoundland, Canada, I don't really know how far you could see it, but if anyone lives from Florida to like Maine, go outside and look to the south or southwest, and you will probably see either the first stage burn, or if you live a bit further north, you'll see the second stage burn. Always a great sight. I believe I'd be able to see it from where I am right now, but unfortunately it's cloudy tonight. And in terms of landing burn, you might see the entry burn, but definitely not the landing burn. That's what I believe there, Evan. But good question. I really appreciate that. Now, one thing I want to discuss here before we get back into questions is actually the countdown tonight. So coming up in just under 40 seconds is when the SpaceX launch director should be giving the go for propellant load. And that basically means they are on for tonight, or at least they're going to try to be on for tonight. Once Falcon 9 begins propellant loading, you are basically either launching at the T0 you planned or not launching at all that night. There is really no chance for a scrub or recycle unless you have a very long launch window. And tonight's launch window, they're launching right at the end of the window at 9:20 p.m. Eastern time. So let's hope we get the go for fueling in just a few seconds here, and we will go from there. Then after that, the fuel loading of kerosene, or RP1, is going to begin at 35 minutes on both stages, as well as first stage liquid oxygen loading beginning at T-minus 35 minutes as well. And we will go from there.
Yeah, just to interject really quick, SpaceX just confirmed that new T0. If you were following this mission before tonight's broadcast, the T0 was originally expected to be 9:10 p.m. Eastern Time, or 1:10 UTC, and they pushed it 10 minutes to 9:20, and SpaceX did just confirm that that was for weather. So I think they're just optimizing within the window for their best chance to have favorable weather. So we'll hope that the weather holds out. From here at the press site, there are definitely some clouds in the area, but don't see any major storms around, so hopefully all will be cooperative in just under an hour. But yeah, just a very slight T0 change, and like Ian said, once they do begin the fueling process, it would be a long process to recycle, and they likely wouldn't have another opportunity tonight. But they do have a backup opportunity tomorrow should they need one. But on that front, just to also touch on something I mentioned earlier, there's another launch scheduled for tomorrow night from over at Slick 40 on the Cape Canaveral Space Force Station side. That'll be yet another Starlink mission. That mission is only Starlink payloads, no ride shares on that one. And assuming this mission goes off tonight, they will be able to launch that one tomorrow. Those are two of the rockets I can see from the press site here. The other one, of course, being SLS, which is still out at Pad 39B as the teams work towards the next Artemis 1 launch attempt, potentially later this month in just a couple weeks. But lots of rockets out, and one of them is going to be the star of the show tonight.
Awesome. Very cool. And before we hop back into more questions, I'm just going to run through some super chats here. Again, we're always thankful for people supporting us through super chats. First off, we have John Hansen becoming a new Red Team member, as well as West Coast Films becoming a Red Team member. So thank you very much for both of your support in terms of memberships. And in speaking of memberships, Moldy Space Industries, a regular on the stream, has gifted 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much, Moldy Space. We appreciate that. As well as Jurwa gifting 10 Red Team memberships. Very cool to see there. Thank you very much for the support, everyone, in terms of memberships. As well as Musical Wolves with a $2 super chat saying, finally, SLS is happening. SpaceX launching Starlink. Oh boy. Thank you, Musical Wolves. But we appreciate that. As well as Evan Hubbard with $5. Chance members could get a version of the intro for ringtone use. I forget what the song is, but there is a song that we have for it, and I forget what it's called though. But
I think you need a license for it, unfortunately.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll look into it, but no promises.
Gotcha. Thank you very much, Evan. We appreciate that, as well as Moldy Space again saying #Thomas Fan Club and #Worm Booster Good. Absolutely, I agree very much there, Moldy Space. And West Coast Films again saying greetings from the best coast. Any speculation on where SpaceX may build their first international base, should it be needed? Honestly, I don't even think that's really in the cards right now. Anyone have any thoughts on an international SpaceX thing? I think that's far into the future at this point.
Well, I think if they want to get their point-to-point working at any point, they should probably look into some international bases. But as far as anything anytime soon, I don't know if their focus is necessarily there at the moment, seeing that the most important thing is to get to orbit, and everything else seems to be falling behind that.
Yeah, I think so.
To interject again really quickly, just a quick countdown update. They have started the launch auto sequence, so propellant loading is now underway. Like Ian overviewed earlier, kerosene and LOX are both flowing into stage 1, and kerosene is beginning to flow into stage 2. All systems are currently go for liftoff at 9:20 p.m. Eastern Time or 1:20 UTC.
Excellent. Great to hear that. And while we're talking about propellant loading, one thing we're going to notice with the launch vehicle over the coming about 10 minutes or so, we're going to start to notice some condensation building up on the sides. And what I mean by that is there's going to be ice forming on the side. And that ice is going to eventually kind of evaporate or sublimate and become a small white vapor coming off the vehicle. So if you notice some white vapor coming off the vehicle, don't worry. It's just some water vapor sublimating off from the side. Very cool. And so thank you, West Coast Films. We appreciate that question, as well as Sedated We. So with $5 saying, was the booster launching tonight the same one that was in port during the first Artemis 1 attempt? I don't believe so. I think that'd be a pretty
no, I
quick
don't think so.
turnaround. Yeah, there's a lot of boosters in the flow.
Oh, the turnaround on this booster was 66 days, so it definitely was not that booster.
Gotcha. And yeah, I mean, this is getting up in the flight rate. I'm sure since this is the first 14th flight booster, it probably took a bit more intensive inspections just to make sure everything was all right, see how it's performing overall. And yeah, I bet it definitely is going to be a bit longer turnaround. They get higher up. But thank you, Sedated We appreciate that. And Moldy Space with another 10 Red Team memberships. Thank you very much, Moldy Space. We appreciate that, as always. That means so much. As well as Jerwa with 20 Red Team memberships. We have seems like we have a bit of a battle going on in chat in terms of gifting memberships. I love to see it. But thank you again, everyone who's gifted memberships, everyone who's become a member. That is a great way to support the work that we do. And we genuinely appreciate all of that. And the Captain Fuzzy with $10 saying, will they start washing the soot off if there's 100 planned flights? Can it even be washed off? Well, I think since the first few boosters had soot washed off, I think it's possible, but I don't really see a reason to, It just seems like it'd waste a bit of time. Anyone have any thoughts on, washing soot off?
It has to have
Well,
some
I
kind
can
of
tell you a
mass.
fun little party trick.
Ooh, go
I
ahead.
mean, the fun party trick about these boosters is even a 13-time booster can look like it's clean when it's all nice and frosty. Just saying.
Oh, yep. Very true. But yeah, I think it'd just be like a bit of a waste of time to clean them unless you wanted like a fancy photo opportunity, because I doubt the soot really adds much to the rocket. If it does add anything, it's probably just a minor adjustment here and there. But good question though, Captain Fuzzy, and we appreciate that. Now, Roseanne DeVasta with $10 saying, please introduce yourselves for us just joining. Well, we have Julia and Thomas out in the field, as well as Nick and I in the studio, and then Patrick and Das are operating, and I am Ian. But thank you, Roseanne. I appreciate the super chat. And Kylie here saying hello from the future NSF team. Sunday morning here in Sydney, and saying nice to be able to join us for a launch live. Very cool to hear you're joining us from the future, Kylie. We really appreciate that, and we hope you have a great day in the future. Now, if you're looking at the rocket right now and you look towards the bottom of the vehicle, you can see some bit of a white puff coming off the vehicle. Now, I did just explain this a few minutes ago, but in case anyone just hopped in, that is condensation coming off the booster. Now, the liquid oxygen that's being loaded in right now is very cold. Very cold, as in, I think, like negative 290 Fahrenheit, something along those lines, negative 170 Celsius. Very, very, very cold. Cold enough that the water vapor in the air, and remember it's Florida, so it's always very humid down there. I'm sure Thomas and Julia can attest. But the water vapor...
Can confirm.
There we go. We got some news out in the field. Live weather report. But yeah, so that water vapor, similar to how you have like a glass of cold water and you get water condensation on the side. Well, this is water condensation as ice. It's so cold that the water vapor in the air becomes ice on the vehicle, and over time that kind of sublimates, turns back into gas, and that's where you get that white puff. We're going to be seeing a lot more of that from the vehicle as propellant loading continues, so be sure to keep an eye out on that, and that's also a great way to see how much propellant is in the vehicle. Now, right now, just the first stage is being loaded with liquid oxygen, but at T-minus 16 minutes, the second stage liquid oxygen loading will start, and then we'll see a lot more white puffs from all around the vehicle, and it will look great. I just love a nice night shot with all the condensation coming off. But Casey Medic here, thank you for becoming a Red Team member, and Gray Germ, thank you for becoming a Launch Director member. We really appreciate both of those so much. That means, again, so much, and it looks like there's a helicopter flying in the background there. Maybe a plane or something.
Yeah, I was about to point that out. Definitely something out there. Could be a helicopter supporting the range, like Coast Guard or Air Force. But yeah,
Yeah.
not uncommon. It's also very possible that it's just far enough downrange that it's actually not a factor.
Yep, definitely. I mean, it looks like not too hazy of a night, so I'm sure we could see something further away. And Roseanne here with $10 again saying, hi, Julia. Well, Julia, they said hello to you.
Hello. Nice to get to say hello because I'm not like Thomas fan club quality yet, you know.
Oh, don't say that.
Aw.
Can we get some Julia fan clubs in the chat, everyone?
Yeah,
We
I
need
was
a,
gonna say, let's do
yeah.
that.
Hashtag Julia fan club. We all love you, Julia. You're great.
Couldn't do it without her.
Definitely. Some
Aw.
great port pictures, booster tracking, all of that. I'm seeing chat
I'm
already
happy to
beginning
be
to
here.
light up.
Oh my goodness.
Aw, that's awesome. But thank you, Roseanne. And John Ryan McGregor saying, why did they paint SLS white? Well, they were going to, but they didn't because, paint is weight, and weight in spaceflight, or I guess mass, I should say, you want to minimize your mass, and paint isn't necessary, so just don't paint it. And that's why SLS is orange. Musical Wolves here with $2 saying, membership gifting contest tonight. Uh-oh, I think we have a new contender coming up here. Thanks, Musical Wolves. But back to the questions, though. From Thendis here asking an interesting question. Thomas, do you think there's any chance for a jellyfish tonight? So do you think we're going to be launching into the sun, or is it a little too late tonight, do you think?
Unfortunately, it is too late tonight. Normally, if you launch right before sunrise or right after sunset, you can do that. But sunset was a little bit ago, and it is probably going to be too late for any sort of significant jellyfish effect. Sometimes, if you stretch your hopes a little bit, you can just get a faint outline of like the exhaust plume once it gets high up. But
Mhm.
we're not in the time of night where it's like prime jellyfish opportunity. Also, there is some clouds in the area, so we'll see what kind of visuals we get from the ground once the rocket gets above those. There is
Ah,
a moon, a bright moon in the sky, so that could, in theory, do some interesting things, but hard to tell. Depends on the angle and stuff. So my advice will be to keep tuning in and wait and see. But I would not expect a more traditional jellyfish or anything tonight.
gotcha. Very cool. And while we're discussing SLS being painted, Daniel said SLS should be painted Delta 2 blue. I'm not sure how I feel about that,
I have
whether I love
seen
that.
like people do CG of a blue SLS, and I'm gonna be honest, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, same with blue Delta 4. It just seems not
Yeah,
right. I
I
think
think the
orange.
difference is because on Delta 2 it was like smooth metal, and so it worked.
Hmm.
But on the Delta 4 or SLS, where it's the foam material, I'm not a fan.
Yeah, where it have to be like forcibly painted on, where it's not necessary. Yeesh, but that would be interesting to see. Thank you very much. And Whitney and John Cook here saying, what are the most reflights of a Falcon second stage? Well, that's pretty simple to answer, which is none. Now, Nick, do you actually want to kind of give us a reason why there have been no reflights of
Sure.
a Falcon second stage?
Well, if there was a reflight of a Falcon second stage, I would have some questions because the way that it works physics-wise, any mass you bring down from orbit, you have to expend some energy or some delta V to safely bring back. So, because of that, SpaceX doesn't bother with any heat shields or any kind of recovery equipment on the second stage, because that would just add a lot of extra mass to the payload. Because the second stage is pretty much going all the way to the target orbit.
Hey, Ian, just really quick, I
Oh,
think you might have
yep.
misread the question.
I noticed it right as we got to the
You know,
end
I
there.
guess it's good that we addressed that first.
That is
But the
no, yeah.
question is a bit of a better question.
I saw that in the queue and I was a bit confused. This makes much more sense. So relights of a Falcon upper second stage, and I would guess 4.
We know it's not more than 4. They
Yes.
highlighted that today will be a new record with the 5th relight for the deorbit burn today. Now, all right,
Yes.
off the top of my head, STP-2 is the mission that comes to mind, which is actually a Falcon Heavy upper stage. But there
Mhm.
were 3 burns on that mission, I think, and then the final, it doesn't really count as a burn. They pacifized the stage where they just vented the
Ah,
rest of the propellant at the very end without actually igniting the engine. So I know they've done 3. Off the top of what did they do on the Global Star mission? That was, I think, only 3 burns as well.
I think
Um,
so.
so I know they've done 3. I cannot recall off the top of my head a time they've done 4. I will let the back room correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty certain I know they've done 3. I think that is the
Yes.
current record.
Yes, if you can't deorbit burn, I would say 3, definitely. I feel like 4, but again, and also I do apologize, Whitney, for misreading your question. I genuinely thought that said reflights, but complete misunderstanding there. I apologize about that.
It's a good question though, so glad we got that right.
No, absolutely, that's a very good question. And now
And
from
actually, I
Go
was going to
ahead.
say, you know what I was going to say? A fun fact with that is the second stage. Uh, that is why now we don't see painting on the first stage, because if we're doing a crew mission and they decide to do some artwork, it actually got moved up to the first stage, which makes this booster very unique because it has,
Mhm.
if you can still see it after the next mission in the soot, it still has a worm and it has a meatball.
Yeah, definitely. And like with the crew missions now, when they do crew flights, all the decals are on the second stage. You'll have like the meatball logo, American flag, and maybe a worm logo, a mixture of those. But yeah, this one has the meatball on board. Yeah, this was the Demo 2 booster, I do believe.
Yes, that was its first
Yes.
mission, was Crew Demo 2.
Yeah.
Also, I just thought of another point to add to that last question really quick. I do know that the record for the most Merlin ignitions on a single mission is 4. Notice how I didn't say MVAC ignitions. On a
Aha.
booster that does a return to launch site landing profile, at least the center engine lights 4 times. You have
Yep.
the ignition for the initial ascent, you have ignition for the boost back burn, the entry burn, and the landing burn. So
Yep.
at the record overall for any Merlin on a single flight is definitely 4. Can't think of a time the upper stage lit 4 times yet, but to fully answer the question.
Awesome. And Danny in the back channel is saying that Global Star was 4, including the deorbit burn. So
There
we've
you
had
go.
4
Okay.
before, but this is one more. And again, several reignitions of an upper stage is not an easy thing to do. I mean, even one reignition is not super easy. I mean, Rocket Lab's Electron rocket, the second stage cannot relight. That's why they have the Curie, the kick stage, because they can't relight the upper stage. So having 5 ignitions of your second stage is quite remarkable, I would say. So very cool mission tonight. And the one and only Luke Skywalker here is asking, how much does the payload weigh? Well, I don't think we have an exact number. I think we could probably calculate it given the number of Starlink satellites, but BlueWalker 3 is 1.5 tons. And then I think each Starlink satellite's like a half ton or so. So I guess 35 times a half. I don't know. I can't.
The mass of Starlink satellites does change as they iterate the design. I don't think we have a super recent number, but
Yeah.
yeah.
Probably, given the record that they've set on more recent missions, I'd guess between 16 and 17 tons. I'm not sure if they're volume constraint in terms of like the fairing volume or mass constraint, but maybe around 15, 16, 17 tons or so. But very good question there. A very important question. And Sukramdi saying that they love the port tour videos that Julia used to do, and did we ever consider bringing them back? This is back when we were talking about Julia here. So, any thoughts on any more port tour videos?
You want another port tour video, huh? The trick with that is actually having enough of our assets in port to give you a really good tour. But next time they're all in, how about I go get us some video footage and we'll make a video, maybe Jack and I.
That sounds good to me.
There have been some relatively new additions to the fleet and some new ships and things, so I think that'd be fitting.
I would say so. Oh, and we have, I believe that is the T-minus 20-minute vent. Is that right?
Indeed.
Awesome. Now that is marking that they are about to begin in 4 minutes, the loading of liquid oxygen onto the second stage of Falcon 9. Now, the reason they're waiting so long compared to the first stage is because, like I said, liquid oxygen is very cold. And when you have something very cold in an area that's very warm, such as anywhere on Earth, the liquid oxygen tends to boil off and turn into a gas. That's why we don't have liquid oxygen in nature. And that's why a cup of cold water on the table gets warm. So with SpaceX, what they're trying to do is to have very cold, very dense fuels. Now, I said very dense because they want to maximize the density of their fluids, and you get maximum density when it's as cold as you can get it. And they want to get as much propellant into their engines as possible, because more propellant equals kind of more thrust. I don't know if it's really linear, but it kind of equals more thrust. So they try to load liquid oxygen. Go ahead.
The way I like to explain it is just you have more energy packed into the fuel tanks, so you get more performance out overall, yeah.
Yes, absolutely. So yeah, denser liquid oxygen means you have more liquid oxygen on board and you get better performance. So they're loading it in very late so it can stay as cold as possible, so it doesn't really have time in the tanks to warm up. The first stage is going to be burning a lot earlier than the second stage, especially including the second stage's relights. So they try to load liquid oxygen as short as possible into the second stage. So very cool to see there. Now this event should conclude sometime soon, and then we will begin liquid oxygen loading into the second stage in just under 3 minutes. And Jadon here saying, isn't the Falcon Heavy upper stage identical to Falcon 9? Thomas, are they identical? I believe that they are.
The upper stages between Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy are in fact identical, yes.
Very cool and good. Again, part commonality. Another big thing in SpaceX is to have minimal parts, as much commonality as possible, basically meaning how many times can you use a single part in different locations. So again, Falcon 9 and Falcon Heavy upper stages are the same. Great commonality there. And a good question here from Mitsu Level here, asking what is the round thing on the right? And I think we kind of got to address an elephant here in the room, Thomas, if I
Yeah.
may
I'll
say
get to the
so.
camera. Hold on.
Yeah, so if you look to the right of where all the plumes are landing, there looks to be a kind of cylinder object. Now that has some scaffolding around it, but if you look to the right of that, there is something with blinking red lights on top. Looks almost like a tower, if I may say, maybe perhaps a launch tower. Looks quite tall and very new. Now, that is the Starship launch tower at Pad 39A. Now, SpaceX is actively working on building 2 orbital launch sites for Starship. The one at Boca Chica is more or less ready for flight, with some tweaks left to go. But at 39A, they are rapidly building a launch site from scratch on the outskirts of the existing pad. Now, as you can see there, the tower is coming along. It's not finished. They only have, I believe, 7 levels installed, or have they installed the 8th already? I think they have the 8th.
They actually just recently installed the 8th.
Yes.
So although the most recent level was also, it's like shorter. If you recall from when they built the Boca Chica one, the top layers were not full height. They were a little bit shorter. And I know that includes some of the hardware for the chopstick arms and things like that. Nick can probably go into a little bit more detail about that if he wants.
Yep.
Oh, yeah.
Go ahead, Nick. Let me hear it.
Oh, yeah. Well, I mean,
Oh, Nick, do you have any thoughts about here on the launch tower? Any excitement here?
Oh, yeah. I mean, where to start though? Am I muted? Am I talking while I'm muted?
You are talking.
Oh, okay. Good. Whew. I've done that a few times. Like, hear me? Yeah. I mean, tank farm's not going to look anything like what it looks like here in Starbase. So we're super excited to see how they build it out, and obviously looking forward to the flyover videos that Stephen and Julia get to do.
Yeah, and actually, I haven't even addressed the main question itself, saying what is the round thing? So the cylinder just to the left of the tower with some scaffolding on it. Now that is a liquid oxygen tank for Starship. Now, I think it's pretty safe to assume that the Pad 39A liquid oxygen system may have been adequate, but maybe not adequate for rapid reflights of Starship. So they are adding in a second liquid oxygen tank specifically for Starship launches. Now, I don't know if they're going to tie in the existing liquid oxygen system to kind of supplement that, or if they're keeping them entirely separate. Now, in terms of a methane tank, they have converted the old Space Shuttle liquid hydrogen storage tank. It was actually from the Saturn V as well, so a very historic tank. That's a bit of a cylinder. You can't see it here in the frame, but they've converted that to liquid methane as well. So a lot of work happening very rapidly down here at Pad 39A in terms of Starship. The 6 legs of the orbital launch mount have been installed. Up next should be the actual launch mount itself, so the big ring, and then they'll go from there. But yeah, a lot of very cool progress happening down there at Pad 39A. Now, speaking of, or going back to Falcon 9, about a minute ago, we should have had the beginning of liquid oxygen loading inside the second stage. That began at T-minus 16 minutes. And now, as we get closer to T0, they're going to finish propellant loading. You can see on the first stage, the white level, the level of ice on the first stage is rapidly increasing, showing how quick liquid oxygen is being loaded into that stage. Now, the next event that we're going to see up in the countdown here is at T-minus 7 minutes, and that's when Falcon 9 is going to begin engine chill. So what that means is they're going to flow a little bit of liquid oxygen through the 9 first-stage Merlin engines just to chill them down, get them ready to be absolutely flooded with liquid oxygen of just a few minutes later. You don't want to shock your engines because you could damage them, you could fatigue them, things along those lines that you do not want to have happen, especially in a reusable rocket. So some very good questions here. Now, Island Waffle here is asking, will they be able to see the Falcon 9 upper stage ignite in the Panhandle? So I assume the Florida Panhandle, in terms of seeing that in person. So I guess it really depends on where you are in the Panhandle.
Yeah, if you're to the east, if the farther east you are, the better chance you have. But remember, this is flying northeast from Cape Canaveral, so it is flying away from you. If you're lucky, if the skies are clear in your direction and you're as far east as you can consider the Panhandle to extend, you might get lucky. But you're a little bit far away. You're not in the best position, but you never know.
Yeah, and we wish you the best of luck. I mean, don't let that demotivate you. Give it a shot, and we hope that you get to see some great results, because even seeing a rocket launch from hundreds of miles away, like I have, it's still remarkable to see something flying into space. It always blows my mind every time, and I love to see it. So good question there, Island. We wish you the best of luck with that. And Tom here. So a question for Thomas and Julia, I guess. How far is the camera here from the rocket, and how are we able to cover these launches in the first place? So where are you guys at right now?
Yeah, I'll start. Julie can certainly add things. We're at the Launch Complex 39 press site. This is the site where media get to observe launches for both Pad 39A and 39B from. It's been used since the Apollo program through the space shuttle, and now for SpaceX's use of 39A, as well as Artemis launches from 39B. We also do have a pretty good view of Slick 41, which is the ULA Atlas V and Vulcan launch pad, and Slick 40, which is the other Falcon 9 pad, although normally for those pads, there's a slightly closer launch viewing site over on the Space Force Station itself. Here we are about 3 miles away, Julia. Julia's nodding her head, so she says yes. About 3 miles, give or take, from 39A. And that's about as close as you can get while still being safe and, not angering any security guards around here. To answer the question of how we get here, different launches are... The media access for different launches are handled by different people. Tonight, SpaceX has very graciously allowed media to view the launch from the press site. Most launches from 39A, media accreditation goes either through SpaceX if it's not a NASA mission, or if it's a NASA payload. So think of all the Crew Dragon or Cargo Dragon missions that launch from 39A or any other NASA payload that goes from 39A. NASA will invite media on to view. This is the same spot that we will see SLS launch on Artemis 1 once that rocket is ready to go as well. For launches over on the Space Force side, the Space Launch Delta 45, or part of the U.S. Space Force, is in charge of whether they allow or don't allow media access for certain launches. But tonight we are here at the invite of SpaceX, and we're always grateful for SpaceX's support.
Awesome. I think I'm going to run some super chats here really quick. Again, we really appreciate all the support we've been getting tonight. It means so much, and it makes live streams like this possible. As corny as it is to say, that is the literal truth, because all this equipment here, all the data, everything is all made possible because of all of your support. And again, we thank you so much for everything that you've given us over the past few years, I guess, at this point. Now, Roger RGR21 with a $2 saying, ASTS, let's go. I'm not quite too sure what that means, but I agree. Let's go. I'm very excited to see this launch. So thanks, RGR. As well as Peter with the $8 Australian. No comment, but we appreciate that, Peter. And Musical Wolves saying, how much ice falls off at launch? Well, I think probably most of it. Most of it falls off within the first few seconds, or most of it right after engine ignition. So, yeah. That's how much, a good bit of ice, I would say, falls off at launch. And Moldy Space Industries with $10, hashtag Julia Fan Club. You hear that, Julia? Everyone loves you out here. Thank you, Moldy Space, as well as Jerwa with $25, again saying, hashtag Julia Fan Club. So,
Aw, thank you.
aw.
You guys are honestly the best, and without these memberships, those fun flights on the helicopter to bring pictures and video of everything going on out here, really, you guys, those aren't possible. And those are the highlight of my week when we get to do them. So you guys got to stay tuned, because we do have another video coming
Ooh.
possibly as early as Monday.
A little bit of a
Mm.
tease right there. And yeah, again, another great example of how the support goes a long way because helicopter rides aren't free. The cameras on the helicopter aren't free. But yeah, thank you very much. As well as Mark here, Mark Garrett's, hey, Mark, saying hashtag Julia fan club with €5. And RGR here
Thank
is
you,
actually,
Mark.
thanks, Mark. And then RGR is actually correcting me earlier, saying that ASTS owns BlueWalker 3. I didn't know the acronym was ASTS, but yeah, I guess actually AST
Yeah.
SpaceMobile or ASTS.
Yeah, it's the operator of the rideshare payload that's launching tonight. There we go.
Yes, I knew it was AST Mobile or AST Space Mobile, but I didn't think of the abbreviation anyway. But thank you, RGR, for confirming that. As well as Diana Starmoon, thank you for being a PadRat member. As well as Gregory Eichinger. Thank you for being a PadRat member as well. And Heather Davis, another PadRat member. And Timothy Demko. Thank you all for becoming PadRat members. Again, memberships are a great way to support us, and we really, really appreciate that. Gary Molesky here with a $20 super chat. No message, but we still really appreciate that. And Tutti Frutti with $2 saying, hey, everyone watching from Chicago, Illinois. Hello, and we hope you enjoy the launch tonight. Thank you very much for the support. And Hugh Man with an interesting question. How many beans are sent into space per year? I mean, I guess that depends on what food they launch to the space station.
This is, I guarantee you, though, someone at NASA knows that number. Like,
You know what? Okay,
someone
definitely.
has
a point to be
inventoried this.
made. I know coffee is a staple on the International Space Station. I don't know. It's probably instant coffee, though, right? It's not like
Yeah,
actual ground
Mhm.
coffee beans, because like
probably.
otherwise there'd be a lot of beans. What a question! I love that.
I love it. Yeah, I can imagine just like a Cygnus capsule launching, and they open it up, and it's just full of beans, absolutely packed to the brim of beans. That's like the first thing that I imagine.
Get a little dangerous if they're just free floating around there.
Well, not free floating. I mean, packed to the brim, as in there's no room for them to float.
Oh, no.
That's not even that funny. I don't even know why I'm saying that, but thank you, Hugh Man. We appreciate. And Jamie Ames with 450 pounds saying, shout out to King Charles III. God save the king. Absolutely. Thank you very much, Jamie. We appreciate that. And Marius here with the 20 Norwegian krones, I do believe, saying hi from Norway, from them and their fiancée Sarah. Well, hello, Marius and Sarah. We hope you enjoy the launch tonight, coming up in just under 7 minutes. One more here from Timothy saying, did the second stage deorbit burn go to tanks empty? No, it does not. It deorbits until it deorbits for a set amount of time and then shuts down. Any leftover propellant is just burnt up with the stage.
Or actually, they try to vent it too before after the deorbit burn is done. So yeah, any residual propellant gets either vented or disintegrates along with the stage during reentry. Yeah.
Yes.
You know what? I'm a little late to the bean party, but while we're talking about counting beans, can I talk about counting likes? I would like to ask a favor of everybody on the stream. If you have not hit the like button, can we have a little like party right now? Because that is one of the free ways that you can support us. By hitting like on YouTube, following us, any of us on Twitter, really helps too. And I love engaging there. But right now, I would love some more likes.
Absolutely, and I agree with that. And I am giving this live stream a like. But yeah, exactly. It's a great way to support us, even just to get the word out there about the stream. And wow, the likes are going up. Thanks, everyone. We really appreciate all of that. That really helps in an immense way. So thanks, Julia, for pointing that out, and thanks everyone for liking. Now, Roseanne here again saying, with $10 saying, thank you for helping me prepare to watch launches from their patio across the Indian River. Ground shakes, windows rattle, let's get to rumbling. Well, Roseanne, we hope you enjoy the launch tonight. It should be a pretty one, especially a night launch, and we hope you get some great views and great sounds from it. Thanks for all the support tonight as well. And Tom the Toad with $20 saying, thank you for the coverage. They can't believe how lucky they are to have all this access to all things space. Just finished watching the newest NSF Live. Yeah, that was a great episode. I'm about a quarter of the way done through it. I was a bit busy this afternoon, unfortunately, but it definitely seems like a great episode. And again, be sure to check out the newest episode of NSF Live with Space Shuttle launch director, or flight director, Wayne Hale, the one and only. That was a great little show there. And Easton here saying, when was the moment for each of you that we knew this was what we wanted to do? And what are we most excited to see in the near future? Well, that's a pretty big question. I think we could really quickly go around the horn here. I would say the SpaceX OG2 mission, when they did the first landing, that kind of solidified that I wanted to go into aerospace engineering. I'm currently in my dorm right now at school studying aerospace engineering. But how about you, Julia? When was something that really kicked you into gear for spaceflight?
For me, it was a shuttle program. I vividly remember Challenger, and just under a year later, I was a space camp kid. In high school, I was a photographer who wanted to be a National Geographic photographer. Fast forward, and here I'm standing at the press site, and I think it's a pretty cool combination of both of those.
Very cool. And Nick, do you have any? When was the moment that it kind of kicked into gear for you?
Well, I've always been a little interested in space, but definitely the well, I don't know. I was gonna say the Falcon Heavy demo mission, but also the first Falcon landing was pretty cool back in 2015. So yeah.
Cool. So I think Nick is of the SpaceX generation.
Yes, definitely.
Yes.
I was my first, like, I guess not very first, but like the first like big time I like sat and considered the shuttle was when I was like 10 or 11 when they announced that the shuttle was over, and I was like, "Oh, so like it's over? We're not going back to space? What?" And before that, it was more routine or whatever. But yeah.
I grew up with a space shuttle. I remember vividly watching the last 3 missions on TV. Then I was like, "Oh, that's it. We're not going to space again." And then went about my daily life until I found out about like Orion and then SpaceX and all that. But yeah, Thomas, what was your kind of moment where it kicked into gear?
I wish I wouldn't have gone last. Mine's kind of a sad answer. The loss of Space Shuttle Columbia is actually what got me into becoming what I eventually learned was going to be called an aerospace engineer. But yeah, motivation to make spaceflight safer so that we can go to space more often and go new places.
Definitely, that's making the best out of not a great situation. And now we're looking at Falcon 9 on the pad right now, venting quite a lot of or having quite a lot of condensation coming off of it, quite a lot of venting. This vehicle is definitely alive. Now we're coming up just over 2 minutes from liftoff, so we're going to kind of guide you through what we're going to be seeing in the next few minutes, as well as the first few minutes of flight. Now, coming up here in about T-minus 1 minute, the flight computer is going to take control of the countdown, and basically everything from here on out is automated. Then the propellant tanks are going to begin pressurizing for flight. Again, they use helium to pressurize the propellant tanks, ensure that the vehicle's nice and rigid, so it doesn't, fold over because of aerodynamic loads. You really don't want that to happen. And then at T-minus 45 minutes, the SpaceX launch director is going to verify go for launch. And from there, that's basically the last signal that we are go for tonight. Now, right now, as you can see, there's quite a lot of venting coming off from both the vehicle and the strong back. Right now, they're basically purging any leftover liquid oxygen and propellants in general inside the strong back, getting it out, basically. So you're going to have a very big, flamey, very violent event happening here in a minute. And the last thing you want is to have some flammable objects or some flammable fluids inside of your launch infrastructure. And, oh, wow, if you look at the water tower, looks like they're topping it off right now, and they're dumping excess overboard. That's something I have not seen.
Just simply means that we're ready for launch and the tanks are full.
Yeah, exactly. Beautiful shot there. Now we can see over the next few seconds, the Falcon 9 will begin to close all of its vents as it begins to finally pressurize itself for flight. And we'll begin to see that in the next few seconds. We can see some vents pulsing there, and we should be getting the final go for launch right about now. Now we're coming up on about T-minus 30 seconds here. Again, there are 34 Starlink satellites on board this mission, as well as the BlueWalker 3 satellite as a rideshare mission. Definitely not your usual Starlink launch. Now, we're about 20 seconds away from liftoff. What we're going to be seeing here in about 1 minute and 12 seconds after liftoff, the vehicle will go through maximum aerodynamic pressure, and we will guide you through liftoff from there. But at T-minus 10 seconds, let's all sit back and enjoy the sights and sounds of Falcon 9 launching Starlink 4-2. Now, we have had engine ignition and liftoff. SpaceX's Falcon 9 with Starlink 4-2 and BlueWalker 3 on board. Vehicles cleared the tower. Now stand by in just a few seconds for some wonderful audio from a Florida rocket launch. And it sounds like we have lost the launch audio there. We apologize for that. It sounds like we had a little technical hiccup there, but we hope you did enjoy the view from Fleet Cam there of Falcon 9 lifting off over Port Canaveral with another Falcon 9 booster watching there on the sidelines. So until we get the feedback there, again, a little technical hiccup there. We apologize for that. We're going to sit back and enjoy some SpaceX views. So the vehicle is now passing through maximum aerodynamic pressure, and that is when there is, as the name sounds like, the maximum aerodynamic loads on the vehicle. Now coming up here in just under a minute, we're going to have main engine cutoff. That's where the 9 Merlin 1D engines on the first stage shut down. The stages separate, and then the second stage will ignite its single Merlin vacuum engine. So far, all looks good on the vehicle, approaching 30 kilometers in altitude at almost T+2 minutes. And one thing I always love seeing is the plume expanding on the vehicle as it ascends in the atmosphere. You can see the engine plume is expanding and getting wider and wider because there's much less air up there to compress the engine plumes. We're about 15 seconds or so away from a main engine cutoff. There's going to be a lot of events here in rapid succession. First off, we're going to have, as I said, the 9 first stage engine shutdown, followed by stage separation, and then the second stage engine ignition. Standing by for that. And sounds like we've had main engine cutoff, coming up on stage separation, and we have had stage separation. And perfect. The second stage Merlin 1D vacuum engine has ignited, propelling Starlink 4-2 and BlueWalker 3 on the last leg towards orbit. Now we got some views on the left here of the first stage deploying its grid fins. You can see some shock effects from the second stage engine still acting on the first stage. I always love to see that. And if you look just behind the left grid fin, you can see some kind of white blobs there. Those are cities along Florida. I don't know exactly which cities they are. It's kind of tough to see at night here. And I also actually saw some lightning in the distance too. Some beautiful coverage right there. Now we have the fairing separation confirmed. The Starlink satellites and BlueWalker 3 are now exposed to the vacuum of space. Now we're coming up on a bit of a kind of slow period in launch right here. The first stage is now coasting on its arc, parabolic arc, as it reaches apogee, the highest point in its trajectory, from where it'll begin to descend towards the open ocean to land on the drone ship. And we can see the second stage engine there burning. Now, Nick, I'm sure you would agree that a shot of Fleet Cam there with Falcon 9 flying over another Falcon 9, that was pretty cool, didn't you think?
Yes, absolutely. It is kind of impressive to see just how many Falcon 9 first stages they have sitting in inventory and how frequently they're all used. This is awesome.
Yeah, it's very, very busy for sure. And I didn't even notice it in frame. I'm just like, oh, that's a nice shot from Fleet Cam. Oh, wait, there's another Falcon 9 there, just waiting to go back for refurbishment for it before its next flight. And soon, if everything goes well, the first stage on this mission will be in that exact same spot in just a few days. Now it seems like the first stage has passed apogee, which again, that is the highest point of its trajectory. You can see its velocity is starting to speed up a little bit more. Now, right now, both vehicles, the first and second stage, are actually above the Kármán line, meaning that they're both in space. And it always blows my mind to see camera views from the first and second stage here because you're looking at vehicles that are actively in space. That always blows my mind, and I love to see it. Now, again, the second stage is continuing to burn to place the 34 satellites plus the rideshare passenger into a parking orbit, from where there will be a few other burns there. But the next event actually happening right now is going to happen in about 2 minutes, or about a minute. So we're going to have the first stage entry burn, which is where 3 of the 9 Merlin engines on the first stage ignite. Now, what this does, this is going to not only slow down the stage through re-entry, but also, interestingly, the engine exhaust is going to act as a bit of a heat shield. Now, this is actually, if people here are familiar with, have seen our streams before, you might know this is called supersonic retropropulsion, which is a term I love to use. So they're using the exhaust from the engines as a heat shield, which sounds really weird, but if you think about it, they're just using the exhaust to kind of push the plasma away from the vehicle. Always crazy to think about, right, Nick?
Wow,
It's-
that's awesome.
It's remarkable. Now, again, that's happening here in about 20 seconds. We're going to see the 3 engines on the first stage ignite. And also keep an eye out on the bottom left at the speed and altitude indicators. The speed is going to go down dramatically over the next few seconds on the first stage. Looks like we're about to have engine ignition. And ignition. Now, if Alex were here, he would love to say this is a 1-3-1 burn. Now, what I mean by that is they ignite the center engine first for about a second or two, and then ignite 2 outer engines. They ignite the center engine first to kind of stabilize the vehicle, let it gimbal, make sure the vehicle's on the right trajectory before igniting the other 2. Then they go back down to 1 engine, and now they have shut off all 3 engines. Now, notice how the first stage is going just over 6,000 kilometers per hour, when before the entry burn, they were going over 8,000. So, shows how much they slow down there during that burn. Now, coming up here in a minute and a half, we're going to see the first stage landing burn, and then the second stage engine cutoff 1 happening around the same time. Now, again, the second stage is going to go into a parking orbit, basically meaning it's just a little place for it to, I guess, hang out before it does its next burn and begins deploying payloads. And this is a shot I love seeing here on the first stage. You can see the re-entry effects on the grid fins. I always love seeing that because, you know, it's not every day we get to see actual re-entry effects on a rocket. You can see the first stage rapidly decelerating as it hits the thicker parts of the atmosphere. Now, Nick, I don't know about you, but I'm really hoping that we get some nice shots here from the drone ship and it doesn't cut out, but
Yes.
they've been getting better at that.
Yes, they sure have been. They've improved them a lot, and man, it's gorgeous. I'm just
Definitely.
so mesmerized by the glow of this MVAC.
And on a shortfall of gravitas, I do believe they mounted the cameras a little bit different to reduce shake. So good choice of a drone ship tonight.
Very cool. And we've had ignition. This is a single engine landing burn. And you can actually see the drone ship kind of appearing in the view now towards the bottom. Now, another thing I love look at the waves. This thing is actively landing on the ocean, and that always blows my mind. We've had landing leg deploy. And touchdown. Falcon 9 Stage 1, booster 1058, landing on a shortfall of gravitas. And at the same time, we have had second engine
Wow.
cutoff.
And there
Whoa,
is your
that-
new fleet leader, 14 trips to space and back, no big deal.
And this is no longer booster 1058-14. This is 1058-15. So now over the next...
No, 13. It was 13, now it's 14. Oh, wait, no, you're right. I am so sorry. I corrected you because I thought you got it wrong. You totally got it right. My
I
fault.
know what I'm
I'll
talking
just stop.
about.
Yeah, I'm so sorry. And I was so
No.
confident.
No, you're good. But yeah, beautiful shot. Oh, and some lightning in the distance. Excellent shot there. Now, actually, a few seconds after second engine cutoff, there's a bit of a flash on screen, and I believe we saw the liquid oxygen tank of the second stage. Uncommon occurrence on the webcasts, but always fun to see. Now, they're going to be getting coast for about 30 minutes or so ahead, or actually, I should say 40 minutes or so. Then they're going to reignite the engine, deploy the BlueWalker 3 satellite, and then they will have a third engine ignition, fourth engine ignition, and then the Starlink satellites will deploy. So a lot is going to happen ahead on this mission. I'd like to thank, before we end our stream today, I'd like to thank everyone who's given us some super chats today, as we have a beautiful view of Pad 39A after a successful mission. Mr. Lucas here, $5 saying, may humanity expand beyond our planet. I agree. Thank you very much. And Viper BT, $9, or $10, no message, but we appreciate that, as well as Broken Dishes, $4 and no message. Thank you very much. And Mike Kretsch, $5, saying, how many launches have we covered? A lot. A lot.
Lots.
Yeah, probably
How
into the
many?
hundreds.
Yeah.
Definitely. And Alan here with 450 saying, will this be visible from the UK during the coast phase? Probably not. I don't think so, because the sun is down and you need the sun to reflect off the stage to see it. But thanks for the question. And Smooth Juice saying, just tucking into a lovely bacon, just tucking into some lovely bacon. Thank you very much, Smooth Juice. We appreciate that. and Rather Be Walking says, can you tell my friend Derek, who's watching the launch, that he's bad at Rocket League? But I don't think I can quite say that. I'd feel bad to Derek, but we appreciate that anyway. And Emerson with $1, thank you very much. We appreciate that. As well as Jerry with $5, saying that their son and I enjoy watching these launches. Can you send a shout out to him? His name's Anthony. Well, Anthony, we hope you enjoyed the launch tonight. And again, we hope you catch some future launches as well. Thank you very much, Jerry. We appreciate that. And G. Jacobson, $10, no message, but we appreciate. And Choclad C saying, tuning in from their apartment, they're in their master's program from Space Systems Engineering because they were also inspired. And our coverage has been a part of that. Well, I'm glad that we could have played a part into that. And a master's program, I wish you all the best of luck in that and all the success in your career. Thank you very much, Choclad. And Katrina here with $2 saying, shout out to their awesome dad, Derek. Hello, Derek. How's it going? We hope you're doing well. And thank you, Katrina. Greg here with a $5 super chat, no message. Thank you, though. And John Miles saying, they watched Apollo, but hooked by a $6 million man crash, an avid lifting body fan now. Oh, a lifting body. Okay, I get what you mean there. Yeah, lifting bodies are very cool, and I'm excited to see Dream Chaser launch, hopefully within the next year. Now, Jerwa here with $10 saying the microphone replacement fund. Thank you, Jerwa. Again, we had a bit of a technical difficulty there during launch. We're definitely going to look into that and make sure it does not happen again, and we apologize. But thank you, Jerwa. We appreciate that. And Easton here with $10 again saying, thanks for the answers. They're curious to see how the partnership between T-Mobile and SpaceX influences communications. How do we feel about cellular from space becoming commonplace? I mean, I think it's a good thing, having constant connectivity is great for safety. Anyone have any other thoughts here?
Yeah.
I don't know, but maybe my T-Mobile will have better reception at the press site.
Aw, hopefully. But thanks, Easton. We appreciate the support. And Eric here with a $5 saying, good night, y'all. You're amazing. Good night, Eric. We appreciate the support. Thank you very much. And Evan here, last but not least, with $10 saying, just saw the entry burn from Ocean Isle Beach, North Carolina. Great coverage. Well, I'm very glad you saw the entry burn. And again, keep that in mind for future launches, not just Starlink, but also CRS and crew launches from the Cape. Anything launching to the space station from the Cape is going to hug the East Coast, and you'll be able to see it from where you are. ML Webb here with $5 saying, happy birthday, Penny. Thank you very much, ML Webb, and happy birthday to Penny. And Jerwa gifted 5 Red Team memberships. Thank you, Jerwa. Oh, I keep reading out these super chats, but more keep coming in. A great problem to have. Xavier with $5 saying, we're awesome, thank you. And they're studying to get their airframe and power plant certification to lead up to working with rockets, hopefully. That is a mouthful, but I wish you the best of luck in that. That sounds amazing. So best of luck to you, Xavier.
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, that's awesome. But yeah, thank you to everyone for supporting tonight. We appreciate all the super chats. Now, again, another great way to support us is through our store. Now, if you go to nasaspaceflight.com/shop, there is a wide variety of several different kinds of items there. Of course, t-shirts are one of our the biggest items, but as well as a lot of metal prints. Now, metal prints are a very high quality print. I'm saying that because I'm looking at mine right now, and I could say that's a very high quality print. Now, personally, I loved the Ship 24 Comes to Life metal print. I have that on my wall actually right next to me. But the metal prints are great quality, great way to display some awesome artwork from all of our photographers and content creators. And again, everything on our merch store is a great way to support the work that we do. So to everyone who went from super chats to memberships to buying something from the store to even everyone who gave this live stream a like, thank you very much for all the support. We really appreciate it. It all helps us to bring more live streams like this to you more content like the KSC flyover videos and all of that. So again, thank you very much, everyone, for your support. Thank you for tuning in tonight. We hope you enjoyed the launch, and we hope you all have a great rest of your night and a great rest of your weekend. Thanks for watching, everyone.
We have liftoff. Propulsion continues to be normal.
Our chamber pressure looks good. Doubling up.
Water towers can fly! Yes!
Tango Delta nominal.
Flight outside SCE off. Bring in SCE off.
Yikes. You bet. Concur. We don't need any more of these.